The silence in Willow Creek was never truly silent. Beneath the whisper of wind through the crooked birch trees, something always seemed to stir. A faint hum, a murmur too low to place, like the world itself was trying to warn anyone who lingered too long. Most townsfolk dismissed it as imagination, but strangers often paused, uneasy, sensing they were being watched. It was on such a night that Elena Marsh, a young schoolteacher new to town, found herself standing on the porch of the old Harrington House. The townspeople had avoided the place for decades. Its windows, long coated with grime, stared out like hollow eyes. Elena hadn't wanted to move into the crumbling estate, but it was all she could afford. The realtor had been unusually eager to hand her the keys, his smile a little too wide, his voice a little too relieved. Her younger brother Caleb had come to help her settle in. He was skeptical of the stories that clung to the house like cobwebs, rumors of flickering lights in the attic, of shadows moving across locked rooms, of laughter when no one was there. He joked about ghosts as he hauled boxes inside, though his jokes grew quieter as the night pressed on. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. The wallpaper peeled in strips, and the house carried the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, as though the walls themselves were bleeding memory. Elena tried to convince herself it was only the age of the building, but the way the floor groaned under her feet made her feel unwelcome, as if the house resented her intrusion. While unpacking, Caleb discovered a door beneath the staircase, a door the realtor hadn't mentioned. Its knob was rusted, its frame nearly hidden by rotting wood panels. When he tugged it open, the hinges wailed, releasing a draft of air so cold it stole their breath. The space beyond was pitch black, though faintly, very faintly, something seemed to shift in the dark. Elena reached for the light switch on the wall, but her fingers froze midair. From within the blackness came a sound, soft, deliberate, and unmistakable. A whisper, her name. Elena Marsh had always carried silence with her. As a child, she would lie awake in the dark, listening for the footsteps of her father when he came home late, never knowing if he would be gentle or angry. She had learned early that stillness could be a shield, a way to survive. Moving to Willow Creek was supposed to be a new start, far from the echoes of the past. But the Harrington House seemed determined to remind her that silence could also be a predator. Caleb was her opposite, loud, restless, forever masking his unease with sarcasm. Yet beneath his bravado there was an old wound, the accident, the one they never talked about. He had been the one behind the wheel that night, the reason their younger sister never came home. Elena had forgiven him, or at least said she had, but the guilt lingered between them like a ghost of its own. The first night passed with little sleep. Elena kept waking to the sound of faint whispers, too soft to make out, drifting through the cracked ceiling. Each time she sat up, the room was empty, the house groaning as if settling deeper into the earth. Caleb claimed he didn't hear a thing, but she noticed the dark circles under his eyes at breakfast, the way he flinched at sudden noises. The second night, the house seemed to shift. Shadows stretched too far across the walls, clinging to corners even when the lamps were lit. Elena dreamed of the locked door beneath the stairs, of standing before it while something inside scraped and clawed, desperate to get out. When she awoke, her hands were raw, as if she had been clutching something sharp. Caleb grew quieter, his jokes fading. He admitted reluctantly that he felt watched, especially when he was alone. "It's like it knows when I close my eyes," he muttered once, refusing to elaborate. His words burrowed into Elena's thoughts, feeding a gnawing dread she could no longer rationalize away. The townspeople, too, seemed eager to keep their distance. When Elena asked about the Harrington family, conversations turned abruptly. A shopkeeper muttered, "Some houses don't let go," before shutting the door in her face. By the third night, even the air felt wrong, thick, humming with a pressure that made breathing heavy. And just before sleep took her, Elena heard it again. Her name, whispered not from the darkness this time, but from right beside her bed. On the fourth day, Elena's colleague from the school, Mara Jensen, stopped by to drop off lesson plans. Mara was practical, grounded, the sort of person who laughed at ghost stories. But when Elena invited her inside, Mara's smile faltered. Her gaze lingered on the cracked windows, the peeling wallpaper, the yawning shadow beneath the staircase. "You moved in here?" she whispered, as though saying it too loudly would draw attention. Elena forced a laugh. It's not so bad, just needs work. Mara didn't smile. Instead, she leaned close, lowering her voice. You should know. The bell didn't leave. Not really. When Elena pressed for more, Mara only shook her head. Don't stay here too long. Some houses don't forget what's been done in them. That night, Mara's words gnawed at Elena's mind. She tried to distract herself with unpacking, but the house resisted her efforts. Every time she set an object down, she'd return to find it shifted, subtly, almost mockingly. A framed photograph she placed on the mantel was later discovered in the kitchen sink, face down in water. Caleb swore he hadn't touched it, but the way his hands trembled betrayed him. The tension between them deepened. Elena accused him of sleepwalking, of trying to scare her. Caleb snapped back, insisting she was the one unraveling. You want to believe this place is haunted so you don't have to face the real ghosts, he spat, and the silence after his words was heavier than the house's air. That night, the disturbances grew bolder. Doors slammed without wind. The staircase groaned as if someone unseen was walking up, step by deliberate step. And when Elena passed the hallway mirror, she froze. For just a moment, she swore she saw a third figure standing behind them, too tall, too pale, its reflection lingering even after she spun around to find nothing there. Unable to shake the dread, Elena returned to the small door beneath the stairs. It was still closed, but something had changed. Scratched into the wood, shallow but unmistakable, was a message. Leave her. The words were jagged, fresh, as though carved by a desperate hand. Elena backed away, her breath catching in her throat. But when Caleb came to look, the scratches were gone, vanished, leaving only smooth, rotting wood. And for the first time, Elena wondered if the house wasn't simply haunted. It was choosing sides. It roared. By the fifth night, the house no longer whispered. The footsteps came first, slow, heavy, deliberate, pacing above their heads though the second floor was empty. Then came the voices, layered and overlapping, calling Elena's name in tones that shifted from her father's gentle murmur to her sister's broken sob. Caleb shouted at the ceiling, demanding it stop, but the voices only grew louder, mocking, taunting, weaving in his own voice until he fell silent, pale with dread. The house no longer waited for darkness. In daylight, cabinets banged open and shut, chairs dragged across the floor by unseen hands. Shadows peeled themselves from the walls, stretching too tall, too thin, watching with hollow patience. Even the clocks faltered, hands jerking backward, refusing to move forward as if time itself had been caught in the house's grip. Elena was unraveling. She barely ate, barely slept. Her body felt like it was carrying the weight of something vast and unseen. Caleb urged her to leave with him, but every time she stepped toward the door, she felt a pressure, a suffocating force pinning her chest. The house would not let her go. It doesn't want me, she whispered one night, her voice cracked. It wants her. Caleb stared, confused and frightened. Who? Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. He knew. Their sister. The one who never made it home. That night, desperate, they confronted the stairwell door again. Caleb pried at the wood with a crowbar, each pull echoing like thunder. As the frame splintered, the house shook violently, lights flickering, walls groaning as if in protest. And then, silence. The door creaked open. The space beyond was no longer a cramped crawl space. It yawned into a black corridor, impossibly deep, impossibly wrong. The air spilling out was cold enough to burn their skin. From inside, a shape stirred, a figure too dark to be fully seen, yet its outline was unmistakably human. It took a step forward. Elena grabbed Caleb's arm, ready to flee, but the house slammed every exit shut at once. Windows locked, doors sealed, the air thick with a crushing weight. And then the figure spoke, not in whispers, but in a voice that shook the walls. Elena, you shouldn't have let him drive. The words froze her blood. Caleb turned to her, horror dawning in his eyes. The figure was still advancing. The figure lingered at the mouth of the black corridor, its outline quivering like smoke, its voice heavy with accusation. Caleb staggered back, shaking his head. "No, it's lying, Elena. Don't listen." But the words echoed in her skull, dragging up memories she had spent years burying. The accident, the night of the storm, Caleb behind the wheel, rain blurring the windshield, their younger sister Es' laughter cutting through the thunder, until the screech of tires and the shattering of glass silenced her forever. But the memory twisted now, not the way Elena had always recalled it. She remembered the argument before they left the house, how she had insisted they take the shortcut, how she had distracted Caleb with her sharp words, her anger at him for drinking again. The guilt she'd buried wasn't that Caleb killed their sister. It was that she had made it happen. The figure stepped forward, and its face emerged from the dark. Not their sister's, but Elena's own reflection, hollow-eyed and grinning. "You've always known, Elena. I am you, and I will never let you forget." Caleb grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "Elena, snap out of it. This house is messing with your head." But his voice wavered. The doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. Did he believe her? Or did he believe the house? Objects around them rattled violently, frames crashing, glass shattering, the very floorboards buckling. The house pulsed with fury, feeding on the revelation, growing stronger with every heartbeat. Elena screamed, but her own voice layered with the figures, overlapping, indistinguishable. She tore herself free of Caleb's grip, stumbling toward the stairwell door, desperate to shut it, to lock away the truth clawing its way into the open. But the door would not close. The darkness spilled wider, creeping along the floor, swallowing the light. Caleb shouted her name, but his voice seemed to come from far away, distorted, as though the house was pulling him into another room, another reality entirely. For one terrible instant, Elena saw his face flicker in the shadows, shifting, not her brother's anymore, but the grinning reflection again. Her breath caught. If the house was feeding on guilt, then Caleb was no victim. He was part of it now. Or worse, he always had been. The walls groaned, the corridor yawned wider, and the figure's grin spread impossibly far. There was no way out. The house shook as though alive, every beam and nail groaning under the weight of something immense. The black corridor gaped wide, its darkness spilling into the living room like a tide. Caleb clung to the wall, his face pale, eyes darting between Elena and the figure that wore her reflection. "Elena," he begged, "it's not real. Don't let it take you." But she couldn't tell anymore. The figure's voice filled her skull, speaking in unison with her own thoughts. "You dragged her into that car. You wanted to punish him. You made it happen." The air thickened, pressing down until Elena fell to her knees. Around her, reality warped. Family photos on the walls bleeding into grotesque versions, their sister's smiling face melting into twisted sneers. The furniture split apart, splintering and rearranging into crude shapes of bodies hanging, broken, accusing. The entity lunged, a shadowy hand reaching to seize her throat. Caleb roared, hurling the crowbar through its chest. For a moment, the figure dissolved into mist, shrieking with a sound that rattled their bones. But as it reformed, the truth struck Elena. The house wasn't trying to haunt them. It was trying to consume them, devouring their guilt, their rage, their grief until nothing human remained. Elena staggered to her feet, grabbing Caleb's hand. "We end it here," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Together, they pulled the gasoline canisters they'd brought from the shed, dousing the warped hallway. Caleb struck a match, his hands shaking violently, and flame roared to life. The fire spread fast, licking at the walls, clawing into the corridor. The figure screamed, not in fear, but in laughter. "You think fire will free you?" It hissed, its grin stretching wide. "I don't live in these walls. I live in you." The flames reflected in Caleb's eyes, but his expression shifted, blank, almost serene. "It's right," he murmured, voice low. "I've felt it my whole life. The accident wasn't just you, Elena. It was me, too. Maybe it chose us." Before Elena could stop him, he stepped toward the dark corridor, arms outstretched, as if offering himself. The shadows surged, swallowing him whole. The house roared, the fire screamed, and then silence. Elena was alone, coughing in the smoke, the corridor sealed shut as though it had never existed. She stumbled toward the door, desperate for escape, only to find fresh words carved deep into the wood. See you soon. When the fire crews arrived, they found Elena collapsed on the front lawn. Behind her, the Harrington House smoldered, its windows shattered, its roof half collapsed. They found Elena collapsed on the front lawn, shapes that looked too human to be tricks of firelight. Elena survived, but she was not the same. Caleb was gone. And with him, the fragile shield she had carried for years. In the quiet of her hospital bed, she replayed every word, every vision, shapes that looked too human to be tricks of firelight. The townspeople whispered that the curse was broken at last, that the fire had purged the Harrington estate of its sickness. Chow, she kept her hands wrapped tight in bandages as though hiding wounds that no doctor could explain. She poked little, but those who listened closely swore they heard her muttering to herself at night, carrying on conversations with someone who was not there. The house itself was reduced to ash, but its memory lingered. Travelers passing through Willow Creek reported seeing the lot at night, glowing faintly as though embers still smoldered beneath the soil. Children dared each other to approach, swearing they heard scratching beneath their feet, as though a door was waiting to be opened again. Elena left town soon after, carrying nothing but a single charred photograph from the house. She moved often, never staying in one place long enough to make friends. But no matter where she went, she felt it. An unseen presence just at the edge of her vision. Shapes that looked too human to be tricks of firelight. The shadow that always seemed to be one step behind. Perhaps the house had burned, but what it fed on, guilt, secrets, the fractures within a family, could never be reduced to ash. And Elena knew, deep down, that someday the house would return,